Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to Helix, Episode 1, The Crashed Ship. The USS Helix had been searching for a missing science vessel, the SS Tesla, which went missing 6 weeks ago while cataloging anomalies in an unstable region of the Shackleton Expanse. This region is notorious for an unusual number of temporal and spatial anomalies, some benign and others extremely dangerous. 18 hours ago, the Helix picked up a plasma trail, likely from a damaged ship. The Oregon system has 2 Class M planets, both with populations protected under General Order 1, the Prime Directive. Oregon 2 has a primitive civilization equivalent roughly to medieval Earth. The residents call themselves the Slithar and are a violent and warlike culture. The residents of Oregon 3, who call themselves Lormeans, are quite different, being mammalian species resembling humanoid lemurs that are noted for a peaceful and communal society. Their technology is equivalent to, again roughly, mid-21st century Earth, just pre-warp tech. But they're still covered by the Prime Directive. The plasma trail from the SS Tesla led directly toward Oregon 3. Captain Krim Maru, one of the few Bajorans in Starfleet, and one of the only ones to command a ship, sat contemplating the planet on the view screen in front of her. Mr. Vinku, are you sure that the plasma trail leads here? Lieutenant Commander Vinku, the Denobulan Chief Engineer, nodded. Yes, Captain, I am sure. She looked over to the other Denobulan on her bridge. And Miss Lussus, are you sure that their satellites can't see us? Lieutenant Commander Lusus, Chief of Security, responded in the affirmative. Yes, Captain. I've modified the main deflector to transmit interference. Unless one of their directed astronomy satellites or ground stations can scan us, they won't notice a thing. And if they do scan us, they shouldn't be able to tell what it is. Damn. Commander Carter Kniffen, the chief science officer, swore under his breath. Meru rounds on him. What is it, Mr. Kniffen? I've good news and bad news, Captain. I've been scanning the planet, and the good news is I've found the Tesla. It crash-landed, mostly intact, in an area of wilderness approximately 200 kilometers from what we believe is the Lormine capital city. The bad news is there are a lot of electromagnetic surges in the atmosphere, which is a problem in and of itself, as they interfere with our scans. But as I was finishing up the scan and trying to get as much information on the crash site as I could, one of those surges temporarily fried our sensor array. We're effectively blind until we can get that fixed. Before Meru could react to Carter's announcement, Vinku was already at work on his console. Already on it, Captain. Repair crews are heading there. We should have the sensors up and running again in an hour. Carter was still wrapped up in his console as Meru responded. Well, that's something at least. And thank you, Mr. Vinku. I'm glad we can have those backups soon. I have a feeling we're going to need them. At that point, she noticed that her science officer was almost seeming to ignore her. Is there anything else, Mr. Kniffen? He looked up almost shocked. Yes, Captain. I'm continuing to go over the data we collected before the sensors went down, and I have some more bad news. There are no humanoid life forms around the crash site, which is both good and bad. However, the computer is having trouble differentiating the native life forms from humans. There's also an extremely powerful energy source about 5 kilometers underground not too far north of the capital city. Captain Krim stood up and readjusted her uniform. Well, it appears that we should try hailing the crew. Vinku looked up and shook his head. We can't do that, Captain. Well, then we should transport down an away team, she said before Vinku could get more out. Afraid not. Due to the unusual energy fluctuations, communications into the atmosphere is ineffective, and the transporters are too dangerous to use. We'll have to go down in a shuttle. Fine. She turned to Commander Quentin Locke, her XO. Take a shuttle. Take Lussus, Carter, Vinku, and Piera with you. Find out what's going on and get those crew back. I don't have to remind you the Prime Directive is in force. She looked to Vinku. If the Tesla can't be repaired in a reasonable time frame, destroy it. These Lormeans are close enough to warp capable that they could probably reverse engineer at least the basics of that ship in a relatively short time. Carter took his place at the helm of the shuttle, with Vinku taking the secondary seat. Brace yourself, everyone. This will be a bumpy ride as we hit the atmosphere. Bumpy didn't even begin to cover it, however. As soon as they hit the atmosphere, the turbulence grew exponentially. Within a few seconds, the shuttle was shaking and almost pitching. Vinku, can you modify the power levels to compensate for these fluctuations? Carter asked, his tone being quite level. Sure thing, Vinku replied as his finger started to fly over the console. Eventually, Carter brought the shuttle in to land near the Tesla. It was not an easy landing at all. As they got low toward the tops of the trees of the forest they were in, there were larger fluctuations than they had dealt with before that neither Vinku nor Carter could deal with them, and they crashed hard enough that it was clear that they were going to need to fix the shuttle before taking off. As the 5 people disembarked, they saw the wreckage of the SS Tesla laying in the burnt remains of the forest around it. The forest had been leveled for about 50 meters around the wreckage. The crew cabin appeared to be mostly intact. The Tesla was a small, civilian version of a Raven-class science vessel. Lieutenant Commander Paria, the Vulcan chief medical officer, started walking around the clearing before stopping and pointing at 2 recent graves. There's some graves over here. She took out a tricorder and started scanning the graves. One of these is human. There are a few people from the crew registry it could be. The second one is Andorian. That would have to be Ibab Fiviet, the geologist. Quentin called to the others. Okay, let's check the ship. Let's see what happened. About 10 minutes later, they all reconvened in what was left of the bridge. So, the bottom line is the ship is damaged beyond repair. Even if we use the supplies from the Helix, the Tesla will never fly again, Vinku began. The warp core had to be shut down prior to crash landing, so there wasn't a catastrophic explosion. Although you can see that the emergency power is still running. Carter weighed in next. The computer data cores have been removed, and that includes the logs. So there's no record of what happened, Quentin replied. Vinku, let's work on fixing the shuttle and rejoin the Helix and update the captain before we make our next move. Vinku nodded and walked out of the wreck. Lussus looked up from the sensor station. Commander? The internal security sensors are still on and transmitting. There are no other life forms in the wreck other than us. Just thought I'd let you know. Thank you, Lussus. Let's go out and see what we can do to help Vinku. As they were finishing up, a sudden breeze stirred ash from the crash site as several flyers came from the cover of the trees and settled on the ground nearby. About a half a dozen humanoids piled out of each of the flyers. They were slight of build and, on average, shorter than humans, covered in a light coat of fur and with large, lemur-like eyes. They moved with a graceful agility as they pointed energy weapons of some kind or another at each of the 5 members of the away team. Quentin walked a few steps toward the humanoids, and a few weapons were leveled at his chest. Thank you so much for listening to the first episode of Helix. And make sure you tune in tomorrow for the next episode of the Monster Manual Backward.